Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And in this one, we're going to be doing a healer tier list for Shadowlands. The main objective of this tier list is to go over how long I think I could play one of these specializations without getting bored of it. The reason that I think this is an important metric to measure on a tier list is because, from my assessment of Shadowlands, is that it's going to be really grindy. You have legendaries you need to level up and put time into. You have conduits that you need to level up and put time into. You have your character and your gear that you're going to need to level up and put time into. You're going to have your covenant that you're going to need to grind and put time into. And I'm not sold on it being able to transition to other classes just yet. So to me, it is a major concern that the specialization I pick that is one that I'm not going to get bored of after investing all of this time into powering it up and leveling it up. I do consider performance because I don't want to also play a specialization that never gets invited to any content. Then you don't get to play. And so what's the point of putting all that time grinding into the character? You don't get to play. So yes, I do take some of performance into consideration using past examples. Maybe looking at a couple of the current raid logs. The main difficulty with performance is that we're still in beta, so tuning could just whoop that goodbye resto druid. That never happens, but maybe it does. So for this, take it into consideration. It's more of a subjective fun tier list. I've been playing the game for over a decade at least now. I've been playing at a gladiator rank 1 level in PvP, 3K rating and rated battlegrounds in the past. I've mythic rated, I've casual rated, I've done mythic pluses to high level. So, and I'm involved in the community in all aspects. Like, I'm watching the Race to World First, I'm watching MDI. So I'm considering the game from all aspects and all avenues, but it is still based on how fun the spec is. I'll take into consideration. So you should know that what things tend to be the most fun for me is like more complicated, higher actions per minute, and like more demand on myself. I find that challenging and fun. But if you're someone who's looking for a more casual and simple experience, I also will take that into consideration on the tier list as I go over the classes. So let's just start here with the Discipline Priest. And I should preface this with a lot of bias. Discipline Priest is my favorite specialization for Legion and Battle for Azeroth. Something good from Battle for Azeroth was the Discipline Priest spec in my mind. It wasn't a top competitor in Mythic Plus. It did well in raids. It's been good, a top contender at the start of BFA and PvP, fell off for a little bit, didn't like that time, but then it's come back and it's feeling strong and good again in PvP recently. It's a specialization that's basically just being enhanced further from its base form, which is awesome. Getting things back like Mind Blast, adding that into your damage rotation, I think is going to be a lot of fun. They have interesting covenant spells, like Mind Games was my favorite covenant spell so far, which is basically you'll attack a target with Mind Games, and then all of that target's damage to your team or your party becomes healing, or all of its healing to its allies becomes damage. It's a very interesting and unique concept. Bit worried that it's going to fall flat because it could be too powerful in PvE, and then it ends up just being kind of lukewarm in the entire game. Hopefully it doesn't, because it is such a cool mechanic. Things like the Boon of the Ascended, just transforming your smite into this big blast attack and getting massive AoE healing. It was a really fun and awesome experience. It's something that I'm looking into. And then things like Night Fae, getting access to the Fae Guardians and being able to send kind of these wisps onto your allies and giving them benefits based on the spell. So damage reduction or cooldown reduction or some resource generation like mana. I love that extra utility from the Night Fae. And with power infusion coming baseline, you'll be able to buff an ally's haste by 25%, use these Night Fae elements to try and really amplify your experience with the Discipline Priest. I found the Necrolord one to be a little bit underwhelming with the Unholy Nova. It's basically Halo, just sends out an effect and heals everybody. I wasn't super impressed with it, but it's probably a top contender for raids. So you do have options that will allow you to pick your covenants for utility, pick them for throughput, pick them for transforming and fun, and pick them for PvP. So it's got all the options. It's already got a great base kit. It's getting a lot of cool spells being returned to it, which is why I would put Discipline Priest on the S tier for healers right now, moving into Shadowlands. Holy Priest is another one that is, oh boy, getting a lot of attention. Like, this specialization, it kind of got forgot. It got locked in the basement and it got forgot. And you know, it must have been doing some push-ups down there because it's coming back really strong here in Shadowlands. I mean, it's get some insane honor talents. I didn't even mention the honor talent for Discipline Priest because it was already getting so much stuff anyways, but things like Thought Steal as an honor talent for PvP, being able to steal polymorph from mages with it, steal fears from warlocks with it. Holy Priests are getting an honor talent that lets them fly in PvP. I thought it was only Demon Hunters that was getting this crazy shenanigans, but Holy Priests, they flap in the air and you can cast heals onto people. I was thinking, what? This is nuts. It's got, Holy Priest has this weird place where I'm not sure if it'll be able to keep up with the damage output of Discipline. So performance wise in raids and Mythic Plus, because Disc does damage and does AoE healing, Holy Priest is contending where its damage doesn't heal, and it's got to juggle globals between healing and damage. So performance-wise, it might run the risk of underperforming Discipline Priest in PvE. But in PvP, with some of the stuff that I've seen going to it, I think that it could be a really strong contender. Things like Prayer of Mending have percentage-based healing attached to it from its honor talents. It's a specialization that got a lot of attention. It's getting the same things returned to it as Holy. It's also getting Power Word Shield to itself. I think it is going to be a specialization that's a lot of fun. It looks really cool in PvP, which is grabbing my eyes a lot because that is my main focus at the moment. I'm a bit worried about its performance potentially in PvE, especially things like Mythic Plus. So you might want to be hesitant in that choice. It's getting the same Covenant selection as Discipline Priest, as it's a pre-specialization. But for me, I would put it overall in the game. I feel like it's on the A tier. It's just not mixed as nicely as Discipline Priest for me. It can end up getting a little bit too just tunneled in on only healing. But if you want that, so you don't like the APM juggling between damage and healing, then Holy Priest will be a simpler experience in that regard. It is getting really cool and fun stuff in PvP. Don't get me wrong. That's why I would still rank it pretty high overall in the game. But in PvE, I'm a little bit worried about it falling off. Now, Mistweaver Monk, this is also a spec that often gets forgotten, at least when it comes to raid performance. It's getting a bit of attention, though, in that regard. It's getting the Bone Dust Brew from the Necrolord Covenant, or you'll just throw a cask on the ground, which it turns all of your healing and damage to anything that gets hit by it into like a Wind Fury effect. You'll have a 35% chance to cast that heal again. So that could be massive healing with Vivify, Cleave, and Raid. That could dramatically increase your performance there if that's a main concern for you playing Mistweaver. It's not really getting anything changed to it, though, which is a big concern. Way of the Crane's coming baseline on a 2-minute cooldown. It's being amplified so that your allies' damage will also heal. So it's a nice recovery mechanic, but I'm worried it won't be able to keep up with the damage output of a Feral Affinity Druid or a Holy Paladin or even potentially a Discipline Priest in Mythic Plus. And in PvP, it's in this weird place where, is it supposed to be a healer that gets in the face and starts punching people, or is it the healer that just sits back and channels Soothing Mist? It's kind of got a bit of an identity crisis. There's not a dramatic amount of stuff changing from it. It seems like most of the changes are just trying to increase its raid performance, which is a good thing. But if you liked BFA Mistweaver, you'll still like it. But for me, I was already kind of getting bored of it. And there's really not a lot changing. No new honor talents, like one new talent. You get Touch of Death as an execute. Maybe that could be fun to fool around with in PvP. Kill a high priority monster in a dungeon. But really not a lot is changing with it. And I was already kind of bored of it in BFA after playing it for just a few months. So it's a specialization for myself personally that I'm worried about. And I'm not sure if it'll perform as good. You still got Ring of Peace at least. It'll probably still perform well. But for me, I'm worried that I'll get bored of it. And there's not a lot of changing with it. So, sorry, Mistweavers. For myself personally, I'm putting it on the B tier. Because right now it's feeling like it's got this identity crisis. Not a lot is changing. And some of the Covenant abilities, like the Night Fae, the Feline Stomp, seem like they're going to be really difficult because they're balancing these covenants between healing, damage, and tank because it's the monk class covenant spell. And I'm worried that they're going to fall flat. One of their covenant spells is almost entirely RNG with the Venthyr. I'm really worried about it. Not a lot is changing. Doesn't feel like it got a lot of attention. I was already somewhat getting bored of my Mistweaver. So it's a little bit lower on the list for myself. Doesn't mean that it shouldn't be for you. If you were worried about if you're still having fun with it, I think they are addressing their raid performance, so it should increase for you personally. But that's my opinion for the specialization. Restoration Shaman. Restoration Shaman, it had the problem of not being able to do a lot of damage while still healing everyone. It just seemed easier for Mistweavers to do damage and heal everyone, Discipline Priests to do damage and heal everyone, Holy Paladins, Resto Druids do damage and heal everyone. But Resto Shaman was one that always kind of got stuck in the middle. Some of it's chain harvest for their covenants for Venthyr, it's like a chain lightning and a chain heal together. It's going to bounce between dealing damage, and then it's going to bounce between healing, and it can bounce then 10 times. It seemed really cool to me overall in the game. That's the one I was looking at for all content. The Vesper Totem seems really awesome for things like Mythic Plus, just dropping the totem down, and even raids, dropping the totem down, bombing your heals, and then it radiates healing to everybody else around it. But still in Mythic Plus, getting out damage quickly while still healing could be a problem for it. I am worried about it being an underperformer when it comes to Mythic Plus. It is getting some utility brought to it, so it's getting its Water Shield, it's getting its Mana Tide Totem restored to it. So for myself personally, I love mana-related spells. I don't know why. I'm sure to a lot of people it's really boring. Like, why do you like mana spells? That doesn't do damage. That doesn't make you top of the meter. That's really boring. Why do you like mana spells? But for me personally, why I like mana spells is because they're usually not necessarily APM based, but you've got to constantly maintain them. And if you maintain them better than other healers, then you heal longer and then effectively heal more than them. It's something that isn't related to just healing out or damage out. It's like it's an own mini game within the rotation of a healer. So getting Water Shield back and Mana Tide Totem for myself personally would be a major selling point to the Restoration Shaman. You have things to pay attention to with such a low cooldown interrupt like Wind Shear. You have great utility with Tremor Totem for fear mechanics. So you've got the healing. You do damage, but not as efficiently as the other healing specializations. So competitively in things like Mythic Plus, a bit worried. You perform well in raids. In PvP, again, this is all dependent on tuning, right? If they just under-tune a spec and it's underperforming because it doesn't have the numbers, then everything I say is kind of blown out the window, right? But as long as it's tuned adequately, I think that it's looking better for myself personally moving into Shadowlands. I think it is a spec that I could have a lot of fun with. It's not S tier with Discipline Priest, but I would put it on the A tier in terms of I could play Restoration Shaman for a long time and not get bored. And that's mostly contributed to the mana regeneration mechanics returning to the specialization. Restoration Druid, if you don't know me from the channel, this has been kind of what my main spec for a long time, or at least a spec that I've had the most success with. This is a spec that often dominates PvP. It's a spec that often dominates Mythic Plus, and no, it does decently well in raids. It's been having a hard time competing with Paladins and Disc Priests with how much damage output they can do, and healer damage is so important in PvE. But it's been a top contender in terms of performance for a while. It's getting a ton of its utility brought back to it. It's getting Ursul's Vortex baseline. Heart of the Wild is returning. They've got a lot of legendaries that are oriented towards its Heart of the Wild. The Night Fae Covenant is looking insane with synergies with the Heart of the Wild. And if the Night Fae Covenant is just cast 16 Druid spells, it's massive damage when you pair that with Heart of the Wild, amplifying your other shapeshift effects. If you want that hybrid experience, maxed out APM, maintaining heal over time effects on multiple targets, trying to min-max, getting damage out in cat form, rotating in with the Heart of the Wild, getting legendaries to reduce its cooldown, getting legendaries to proc its effect. I mean, they're taking everything that was awesome about the Restoration Druid before, amplifying it and bringing back some other stuff. You got raid utility like Stampeding Roar. It's also going to be great for PvP. I mean, Resto Druid is going to be nuts from my assessment of it so far. Like, easily contending with Disc Priest, if not maybe even a tier above Disc Priest right now at the moment for me. And it's almost always a reliable choice when it comes to Mythic Plus, with having Battle Res and having damage with Feral Affinity and applying Sunfire to multiple targets. I mean, this spec is just fun. Like, it's just, there's no doubt about it that Resto Druid is a spec in Shadowlands that I could play for a long time and not get bored of it. So pretty easy, just straight up to the S tier. There you go. We got the last healing specialization here, which is the Holy Paladin. This one is getting some changes in auras returning to the Paladin class. So Devotion Aura baseline talent, Concentration Aura for interrupt reduction. And you'll be able to amplify these aura effects with Aura Mastery. So that cool synergy. I like that. I would have liked to have seen Divine Plea come back. That was the old school mana regeneration mechanic that Holy Paladins had. Same similar to Mistweaver, actually, like with Mana Tea. I actually would have liked to have seen Mana Tea come back. If they had brought back Mana Tea and Divine Plea, it definitely would have helped my ability to enjoy playing those specializations, because there's just something minor that you could do better than somebody else and perform better, which was cool to me. It wasn't related directly to healing. So would have liked to have seen Divine Plea, but it's not coming back. You're going to get Glimmer of Light, the Azurite trait that was kind of dominating Paladin for a while, coming back as a talent. And with Covenant abilities like Divine Toll, which will allow you to Holy Shock multiple targets, synergizing with Glimmer, I struggled to see how Holy Paladin doesn't continue to be a top performer. It's always a lot of fun mixing damage in as well with Hammer of Justice. They've got Holy Power coming back. So things like Word of Glory, Light of Dawn are going to cost Holy Power now, and you can generate it through Crusader Strike, through a lot of your healing as well. So that old school Holy Power, if you liked it, you're going to be able to go back to it. And it's going to synergize with some legendaries. I believe there's a legendary where when you're spending your Holy Power, it reduces the cooldown of a lot of your important blessings. I think that's going to be a lot of fun to play around with. It's still keeping the same utility. To me, Holy Paladin wasn't as intricate in terms of its damage output as Disciplined Priest or Resto Druid. It's certainly not as complex, just throwing out the Hammer, Crusader Strike, and then Holy Shocking, as opposed to maintaining dots, picking between like a burst casted spell, trying to AoE. It's definitely not as complicated damage output wise as Disciplined Priest or Restoration Druid, but it is still fun that you can mix between the two. The Night Fae Covenant is standing out as an interesting one to me personally. The blessing system, where Blessing of Spring, and you can increase your healing done and received to a target, and then it rotates into Blessing of Summer, Blessing of Autumn, Blessing of Winter, and you've got to kind of memorize in the back of your head, like, what does each blessing do? Which target would it be best to use on? There's a lot of decision making with that covenant, so if that's something that you're looking directly at, do remember that this is kind of just a summary of the specializations for the tier list. If you want to go into real detail of what's happening to these specializations, I have class reviews on the channel, which there will be a link to at the end of the video that you definitely want to check out if you're interested in knowing what's happening to your spec and maybe going into it more intricately than I am here with the tier list. This is more or less just a summary of the assessment that I've made for the healers. Holy Paladin might suffer because of their Infusion of Light change, which if you don't play Holy Paladin, when you crit Holy Shock, Infusion of Light happens, which in Battle for Azeroth makes your Holy Light really fast. It's not like that anymore in Shadowlands. Instead, it just makes your Holy Light really big, but not really fast. It's really slow. So in PvP, really slow heals, really hard to make work. Like, you're going to notice that right away when you're PvPing, if that doesn't change. If you're PvPing on a Holy Paladin in Shadowlands, that could be a big struggle. The upside is you're getting some instant healing with Word of Glory, and you can generate Holy Power with Crusader Strike and try and avoid casting maybe. So you might be able to save it there, but that's going to be a real dramatic change, is that Infusion of Light change. Because the Paladin's damage rotation isn't as intricate for Disciplined Priest or Resto Druid for me, it falls short of those specs. And I think it is a spec that I would be getting more bored of faster than a Disciplined Priest or a Resto Druid. I don't have to manage my mana. I'm like an Innervate or a Solace. The damage rotation, again, is more simple, just on cooldown judgments, lobbing them out. It's kind of cool that you get Hammer of Wrath back. So if you're looking for maybe a little bit more of a simpler gameplay in terms of balancing healing and damage than Discipline or Resto Druid, then it would be a good pick. But for myself personally, I think that I would get bored of it more quickly. So I'm putting it onto the A tier. And for myself, I think moving into Shadowlands, like, Resto Druids, it's probably just going to be a top performer, and it looks really fun. Discipline Priest might fall off a bit in Mythic Plus because it's hard to compete with the Feral Affinity Druids and the instant damage from the Mistweavers as well in Mythic Plus and Ring of Peace utility. So performance-wise, Discipline Priest might fall a little bit short, but it's still a spec that I've just absolutely adored for a long time. And that's saying that, like, I played Discipline Priest for the majority of Battle for Azeroth, and I can't say that I ever got bored of it. And with all the cool stuff coming back and all the changes happening, I don't see myself getting bored of it. And that's insane that I can put that much time into a spec, still not be bored of it, even without the updates that are happening in Shadowlands, and then all the updates that are happening in Shadowlands. So this is my assessment for the healers, my tier list, based on how long I think I can play the specialization without getting bored of it. Again, check out the class reviews. There's going to be a link above here at the end of the video to click, and you can look in detail for what's happening to your specialization. I'm still adding and updating them as we go along for the beta. I want this to be a resource for everyone to make the right decision for themselves on what they want to play. Because again, I think that Shadowlands is going to be a big investment, and I personally want to make the right choice on what I make for a spec, and I want to help you make that choice as well. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did. Comment down below if you didn't. If I, Mistweaver on a B tier, you're not happy with that and you got something to say, you feel like it should have been higher, leave that down in the comments down below. Subscribe to the channel if you like the content, as it will update you when I'm uploading videos. We'll see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.